Everyone. Today I will be playing Cheerios, also called Pure Steel Paladin combo. And this deck is, I want to say, the most powerful combo deck in Modern. It suffers from the crippling weakness that is its inconsistency. Right now, it's not the most consistent deck. You have to mulligan a lot. You mulligan extremely frequently, and a lot of games you just lose because you can't draw a good hand. And you don't really even get to play Magic in those games. To compensate for that, you have extremely fast wins. It is possible to win on turn 1 with this deck, although extremely rare. It is very common, well, I kind of feel like around 10% of my games, I win on turn 2. With any decent hand, if I have a 7-card hand that I want to keep, I have pretty good odds of winning on turn 3 if my opponent doesn't do anything to me. With Cheerios, you're very capable of going from a couple lands in play, your opponent's at 20 and you don't have very much going on, to, oh, I had a good string of good draws, I win the next turn. There have been many games I've played over the last few weeks where I was looking at a hand of equipment and a couple lands, and my opponent had some insane board state where I was at 1 and he had, 6 creatures in play about to kill me, and then I just draw a Strom or a Paladin and just play a whole bunch of cards, and suddenly they're dead from me having absolutely nothing going on. So the trade-off is inconsistency with great power. So more about the deck. If you're not familiar with it, you play Strom and Pure Steel Paladin, which both draw you a card whenever you play an equipment. You have 20 equipment. Once you have one of these in play, you have 20 cards that are essentially 0-mana cantrips. If you have 2 of them, you have 20 cards that are 0-mana divinations. You draw through your entire deck. You use Mox Opal and Retract to pick up all the things you've already played, play them again, draw a shitload more cards, and then you dig yourself to a couple of Mox Opals and a Grape Shot. You Grape Shot your opponent's face, and they die. You've got some built-in anti-hate cards, like if there's something awkward that your opponent's playing main, you can just bounce it with a repeal, like bounce a Thalia, bounce a, what's something awkward that, like from the Word Prison deck, the Witchbane Orb, that's what I was thinking about. So repeal can deal with problem cards like that, and you can also just kill people very quickly. In the sideboard, you have a bunch of Burned and Forge Tenders against red-based removal decks and Burn. It's really nice against Phoenix because you're generally faster than them, and they've got only Lightning Bolts and Lava Axes to kill your guys. So you play a Burned and Forge Tender, you preemptively countered their spell, and then you play a guy and win. Fragmentizes for annoying things like Damping Sphere. Hurkyl's Recall is even better against artifact-based prison decks. Gelson's Path to Exiles for Thalias and things like that. Silence for counterspell decks, and then Monastery Mentors. I recently moved 2 into the main. I'm not sure if they should be there, but Monastery Mentor is extremely powerful, especially against Thoughtseize decks and decks with lots of removal. You just up your threat density, and I mean, maybe you don't combo off and win the game, but if you play a Monastery Mentor and play 3 random equipments, you make 3 random dudes, play a Retract them all, make 3 more dudes or something, or save them for the next turn to just make all of your monks into huge things. So that's how the deck works. Now, the thing that gets me really excited about this deck is not going to be present in this video, because the thing that gets me excited about this deck is the London Mulligan. Now, the London Mulligan is a proposed mulligan change that comes up in a month or two, where they're going to test, instead of when you mulligan, you get less cards and have to choose whether or not you keep and then scry 1. Every time you mulligan, you get 7 cards, and once you keep, you choose however many cards to put on the bottom of your deck. And this is incredibly good for Cheerios. For starters, there's some cards that are just totally dead in your opening hand, like Grape Shot. You never want to see this card in your opening hand. So if you mulligan, normally, if you mulligan and have a Grape Shot, that's like an extra mulligan because Grape Shot's useless. But in the new mulligan rule, you'll never have to keep a grape shot on a mulligan. You'll always be able to bottom it, so you'll be doing much better. The second thing is that really what you're trying to mulligan for is the ability to play one of these guys on turn 1 or 2. That's pretty much all that matters. And then the rest of this is just 0 mana cantrips. That's the whole point. And so you have to really aggressively mulligan to your 2 mana dudes in order to have your deck function. Like, if you keep a hand that cannot play one of these, you don't do anything. That, like, plain and simple, your game doesn't happen until you cast one of these cards. And so the effects of the London Mulligan is making this deck so much more consistent at drawing the important cards and the lands to cast them. So I wrote a Python script to do Monte Carlo simulations, which is it shuffles the deck, draws 7 cards, looks at it and says, can I cast a Srom or a Pure Steel Paladin on turn 2, 1 or 2, without having to draw more cards? And it just shuffles the deck, looks at the top 7 cards, and asks that question over and over again. And then, so I've got it set up to look at what happens when it mulligans. And here's the difference between the old rule mulligans and the new rule mulligans. Under the old rule, so we have a sample size of looking at 100,000 different games. So over the course of 100,000 games in the old rule, assuming that you're only keeping a 7, 6, or 5 card hand if you can cast one of those guys on turn 1 or 2, and you'll always keep 4 card hands just because you're not going to 3 or whatever. In the old rule, 32% of the time, you don't get a hand that can cast either of those guys. In the new rule, the London rule, that goes down to like 19.5% of the time. Relative difference, this is like cutting the number of games where you don't get to really play in half. Or not quite half, but kind of maybe like, I don't know, 60, 65%. Anyways, a very significant percentage of the games that you would used to just lose because your deck didn't cooperate are gone. And I feel like most of the games where I keep a workable hand, I win. And so I feel like the London Mulligan rule, just the rule change, will give Cheerios something like maybe a 5 to 10% matchup win percent in every matchup across all of Modern, just like plus 5 to 10% win rate. Just because mulliganing is so much more important for this deck than it is for any other deck I've ever seen. Because it has significantly fewer hands that do anything, but if it gets to do its thing, it's just broken. So anyways, I've blathered enough about the deck. Let's get into a few games. I have no idea if I will get horrifically unlucky or very lucky in these games. Hopefully they're entertaining. If you're the kind of person that doesn't like watching non-games, I got bad news for you. This deck generates a lot of non-games. Mostly because when I win, I'm killing my opponent on turn 2 or 3. It's like, oh, you tapped out for a thing in the ice on turn 2. Cool, die. And then the games I lose, it's where I didn't get to cast one of these, or I didn't get to stick for a turn. And then my opponent did stuff and I died. There's definitely some interesting games. There's interesting sequencing decisions to be made. And definitely there's more than you would initially think to the deck of just like, oh, it's dumbass combo deck that, you know, either it works or it doesn't, and if they have 1 Thoughtseize or 1 Lightning Bolt, they lose. That's not entirely true. But definitely Coffee House Ryan. I feel like I've seen that name before. So this is an excellent hand because it has 2 lands and it has Pure Steel Paladins. That's really all I care about. I just like, if I see 2 lands and a Pure Steel, I will keep. That's it. It's Tron. Okay. So I feel pretty good about winning. So my opponent will have turn 3 Tron. Let's see if I can kill him on turn 2, shall we? Loaded Strand, not really what I want to draw. So if we can get a long string of equipment in a row, decent shot of winning. I swear I clicked always yes. All right. So I'm going to repeal the opal, which means it costs 0 to do that, essentially, and means I get another shot at more things so that when I play this retract, it will be more impactful. My opponent's just like, yeah, I've got nothing. I'm going to search at my land and then just F6. So my opponent is F6'd, and all right, we got some pretty good luck. So, okay, we win. As soon as we find a second opal, this game is pretty much locked up. Because we have the storm count. So this is like a 0 mana draw 9. Have we drawn an opal yet? Yes, we have. All right. So red and zap. Storm count 34 on turn 2. Good game, sir. Good game. So I feel like that was a rather auspicious start to a sequence of videos. Hopefully every game goes like that. Don't really expect it to, but you know. So against Tron, I just want a Fragmentize and a Hurkyl's Recall. Hurkyl's functions as a more expensive retract when it doesn't bounce all of your opponent's artifacts, and Fragmentize is there to just blow up his stuff. Really, I just am trying to make my main game plan as consistent as possible. So it doesn't matter if your opponent's setting up to play a turn 3 card if they're just dead on turn 2, right? All right, let's see if we can get another great hand. Well, this hand does not have a paladin, so it's a mulligan. This hand would be a excellent hand if it had a paladin, but it doesn't, so that's a mulligan. That's a mulligan. Yeah. All right, down to 3. Let's see what we can do. So I'm not going to crack this Marsh Flats because I want to increase my chance of drawing a land. Nope. Well, so far this video you have seen both the insane luck of kill your opponent on turn 2 and the well, I mulligan to 3 because none of my hands were keepable. So I'm going to exile Srom. Because essentially what I'm looking to do is get really lucky and win next turn. Not quite. So next turn I'll exile Repeal, I suppose. But my chances of winning are basically gone. I really shouldn't have hit F2. Alright, anyways. I was never winning that game. was going to draw a land. But I've actually gotten there. Not really. There was no retract in there. Anyways. Let's hope for a better hand. Game 3. And this time I am on the play, which does help. The most helpful thing about it being on the play is that if I have a 2-land and multiple dork hand, I can play out 2 dorks and have a much lower chance of fizzling. Not keepable. Definitely keepable. Alright. This is good. I like this. So my opponent's mulligan down to 5. I think I do actually care for them, want to keep their net, because it's essentially going to just be a 0 mana cycle, so there's no reason not to keep it. The big question is, do I start playing out stuff now? And I think the answer is I'm going to wait until next turn. Because even if he kills this, I still have this ROM. So this only goes badly if he had 2 removal spells and they were both 1 mana, so like double Dismember. But doing it this way, now that I'm drawing 2 per thing, I'm extremely unlikely to fizzle. So there's the Retract and a Noxious Revival. So I am guaranteed, or almost guaranteed, not to fizzle, because I could Paradise Mantle to the Pure Steel Paladin. So like, just from what you see, if I had drawn nothing else, this is 2 draws, plus another 2 draws, plus another 2 draws, plus 14 draws, plus 14 draws. So that's like over half of the deck, and in there's guaranteed to be enough things to draw the rest of my deck. I am almost like essentially, oh, and the Noxious Revival. So yeah, I'm mathematically certain to draw my entire deck that turn. There's no way to fizzle from there. Cool, so that was match 1, and I'll see you next match.